Welcome back to your last video for the executive branch. Today we're going to be looking at activism in the executive branch. So when you think of activism in regards to a specific branch of government, I want you to think of someone who maybe pushes the boundaries a little bit, maybe does a little bit more than the Constitution allows them to do, but doesn't necessarily act in an unconstitutional way. So just really active in their specific branch, in this case, the executive. So, executive orders, this is one example of activism in the executive branch. And we've talked about these before. An executive order is something that has the weight of law, but it isn't a law, right? So, an executive order is signed by the president and is treated like a law, but it doesn't go through the lawmaking process. So, it doesn't go through the House of Representatives and the Senate, doesn't have to be passed on to the president, and options for vetoes and all that kind of stuff. An executive order is just it's a decision signed by the president into law, or it has the weight of law. An example of an executive order that I want you to think about, and we're going to talk about it in class, was actually signed during FDR's administration, and it's a really, really horrible executive order. It was Executive Order 9066. And this executive order called for the internment of Japanese Americans. So this was during the time of World War II. It was right after Pearl Harbor. And this executive order authorized the relocation. Basically, these people were taken out of their homes and put in military camps throughout the country. So that's a really horrible example of an executive order, but that's something that you can think of when you think of how powerful executive orders are. So, another example of activism in the New Deal, speaking of FDR, is FDR's first 100 days in office. Okay. So, FDR is he's well remembered as being a president that helped get America out of the Great Depression and led us almost all the way through World War II. But one of the things that he did to help America recover from the Great Depression was he authorized massive government spending. And he did that through a whole bunch of different acts or alphabet soup programs. You may have talked about them in other classes. So the TVA, that's the Tennessee Valley Authority. That was an organization that was designed to bring electricity to the Tennessee Valley. We have the National Industrial Recovery Act. And this was an act that was, it was a program that was designed to promote American businesses and try to get people back to work. He also is responsible for creating the Social Security Administration, which was a kind of like a retirement or for people who reached a certain age. And he also kind of pushed the limits a little bit of his supporters, and he created what was known as the court packing plan. So there were a few Supreme Court justices who didn't really like FDR's programs. They thought that they were, a little unconstitutional. He was going too far. He was being too active in the executive. So FDR decided that he wanted to add more Supreme Court justices to the bench. So right now there are 9. He wanted to add 6 more. And according to the Constitution, if there are vacancies on the Supreme Court, then the president gets to appoint those people to fill those vacancies. So if they would have allowed this, he would have had 6 positions to fill. So another example of the activism in the executive is Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. So President Johnson was in office right after JFK. And he had this idea that we were going to have a great society, that we were going to be this awesome place that everyone could come to and everyone could thrive and prosper. He's responsible for creating Medicare, which is that health care for older people. He's responsible for Medicaid, which is health care for the underprivileged. And this is the ESEA. This stands for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So LBJ is responsible for giving us pretty much public education as we know it today. He's also responsible for trying to improve water quality throughout the United States, which is pretty interesting. So I want you to think about what the New Deal and the Great Society programs have in common, and we're going to talk about that in class. If you guys have any questions, let me know.